Year's Garden Project. Thank you.
Thank you. I teach at the Faculty of Education at the University of Winnipeg, and mostly 4th and 5th year students and sometimes post-baccalaureate students. But part of my job is supervising student teachers at different schools, and the school I most recently supervised in was Champlain School. And I met Maxine at Champlain School. And when I'm teaching teacher educators, I always say, you know, you have to teach from your passion. So today I'm going to be talking to you about a couple of my passions. One of them is teaching, or 3 passions. One of them is gardens, and one of them is building community or doing collaborative work with people. So this is all in the context of place-based learning. And those of you who were in the last presentation, they talked about place-based learning. They talked about, you know, bringing instead of bringing the students to another place, finding the place that the students were at and creating an educational center there on Selkirk Avenue. So place-based learning is, I think, a really significant piece of education. Is that legible? Good. This is a quote from Wendell Berry, and Wendell Berry is a farmer and a poet and a voice for environmental education and for the ecology. And when I was reading some of his stuff, he said that this one plant, this Maximilian sunflower, was out of context. It grew to a huge height, and that was out of context for the plant. And he also said the context for the plant is to grow in a group of Maximilian sunflowers. So I think if we are defined, as Wendell Berry says, by both our individuality, what we can do as individuals, and by our community, by our belonging with other people, then the places that we inhabit and the communities that we construct in those places will help generate our collective and individual identities. Place-based learning is about reconnecting children to the places they already belong in and grow up in and go to school in, but maybe haven't fully experienced. And it's our job as teachers and educators and adults to help them experience that place. They themselves will be constructing that place as they learn about it and creating meaning, both within the living and non-living parts of that place. So place-based learning develops a focus on groups and systems and on community. And it's an orientation to teaching that I am taking up and watching other teachers do in their classrooms. And there's a quote there again about if we want children to feel they can participate in democracy, then we start by having them participate in creating the place they inhabit, their home, their schoolyard, their school classroom. The exciting thing about, if you teach social studies, which is what I used to do, place-based learning moves through the past, the present, and the future. So in connecting to a place, the students discover its history. What was the Merchants Hotel in 1970? What was it in 1998? And what is it now? And what can it become? And they understand themselves as having a place in history, as agents of history, as Paulo Freire would say. They aren't just passive, they can make things happen. And the presentation this morning about the students creating the garden in Seven Oaks School Division, they evolve into a sense that they can make things happen. And if they can make this happen in this place, then they can make something else happen in another place. A school garden is a place that you can start together. And even when it's started, you can add to it or change it or transform it. So this physical place, if it's created in a school, has all kinds of potential. It provides both continuity and change. Okay, my first school garden happened when I was just in the beginning of my teaching career in the mid-'80s at Edmund Partridge Junior High, as it was called then. And what happened is it was spring and my students were really fractious, grade 8 and 9 students. And I decided we're going to do something because they need to do something. It's enough sitting around doing social studies out of books. And so we decided, it was one of those, you know, teacher-led, but I'm hiding it discussions. What would you like to do to make the school a better place? And I already knew I wanted to dig a flower bed at the front of the school. And miraculously, it evolved that the students wanted to do that as well. So there was this, you know, there was grass and there was concrete foundation, and I had just this vision of a flower bed. And so we got together, and I had lots of teachers in the staff room telling me it was a waste of time, because even if we managed to get the flowers planted, and even if they managed to grow, over the summer they would be trampled and die. And I thought, well, if they get trampled on and die, you know, at least we did something, you know, that would take up a couple afternoons in June. So that's what we did. I brought shovels, and we got some from the maintenance people, and they dug up this bed, and then we went and got plants, and they were like the world's most boring annuals. As a fancy gardener now, I would tell you they were the world's most boring annuals, but we planted petunias and marigolds in front of the school, and you know what? They didn't die. They lasted the summer. They were there when I came back. And if you drive by what was Edmund Partridge Junior High, and now what's it called?
It's back to
Oh, it is.
EP.
It's back to EP. Well, if you drive by there, you will see there's a fantastic perennial border in front of that school that was generated by this ugly little strip of petunias in 1984. And not only that, when I was teaching a post-baccalaureate course on sustainability, one of the students in the course, two of the students in the course, were teaching at that school, and their presentation in my course, in our course, was about the garden they created behind the school with raised beds and vegetable gardens, and all the problems they were having with the garden and all the great stuff that was happening with the garden. So the story is just, I hope, self-sufficient, that it's worth starting something. Okay. I think these are worth repeating out loud to say environmental education for sustainability is relevant, holistic, values-oriented, issue-based, action-oriented, and critical. Those are all the things you can do in the school garden, except maybe the critical education, but if you try really hard, you can do that too. Because just like those teachers in my course were saying, well, this is what worked about the garden, this is what didn't work, you can do some work with your students about what's working in your garden and what's not working. The garden lets you do these things. And gardening is not just about growing things, it's about eating. And there's no easier way to connect to your students than through food, in my experience. Well, there's a couple other ways, but food is a really good one. The sustainability piece, which is so much a part of the social studies curriculum that I'm teaching, can be incorporated through this work. The school garden is a form of an outdoor classroom, but it's more than just an outdoor classroom. It's a place where you can actually do what you're talking about with your students. It's hard to do it in Manitoba because of the climate, and the school garden that I got involved with, you know, had problems because of the climate. But we can make those adjustments, and we can help each other make those adjustments. And when we're in the garden, we're not just looking at plants and the potential for food, we're looking at a whole ecological mini system. What else is in the garden? You know, what bugs, what flowers, what weeds. So let's skip from the mid-'80s till 2 years ago, and I was supervising at Champlain School, and Maxine Geller was the principal at Champlain School, and I wanted to start working on school gardens. And I found a teacher in the school who was already working on growing things in the classroom. And there were already beds outside the school because there had been a school garden earlier. And so I got together with that teacher, and it wasn't easy. She's a very busy teacher in a very busy school, and she wasn't necessarily sure she wanted someone from outside the system getting involved with her kids in her classes. But she was also really interested in having someone outside the system getting involved with her kids and her classes. So we found a way, and it really helped that I was already there doing something else. The project that we're doing involves indoor and outdoor gardening combined. So the students start the plants inside and then take them outside. If you can imagine this classroom, there's some words up there, but I will just tell you a little bit about it. Like, it's just crammed full. She's one of those teachers who has a lot of stuff and a lot of kids and desks and computer stations and the coat rack is in the room in this particular school, so there's all that, you know, every time I'd come in to supervise, I'd be stepping over people's boots because I didn't want to step into the middle. Then she has a carpet in the middle where she does a lot of the math work with little stools that move around and things. And then right over here by the window, well, by the window, she has a green space with a big tree that she brought into the classroom and a greenhouse, like a little shelf with plastic cover for growing plants, and an animal. It's a guinea. Yeah, it's a guinea pig, right? It's a guinea pig, and it's got a nice spacious cage. And a couple of kids with special needs are especially involved in taking care of that guinea pig, but everybody is taking care of the guinea pig, okay? And everybody is doing math, and everybody is doing ELA, and everybody is also involved in growing these plants that are on the shelf. Some of them are in the greenhouse, and some of them are just on the shelf. So we formed a partnership, and these are the things that we were working together. Some of the things that were in my mind about how to do a school garden was that we would integrate subjects. Well, that's already happening in this classroom. So all I can do is support this integration that's already going on. I don't have to get involved. Then there's intergenerational learning, I think is really a valuable piece of school gardens. And I would say that at this point, the only intergenerational learning that's going on is me being present as some kind of older teacher, which is how the kids see me, some sort of older lady teacher. But I'm really hoping that the intergenerational learning will evolve and develop. That involved, you know, that would involve some planning with and some community work. And it also involves having some boundaries. She's the teacher. She's a lot younger than I am, and I need to not get in her way while she's being the classroom teacher. And I need to be reliable as someone who's working with her. And the other thing is to interrogate the curriculum and see if what we're doing is really sustainable. And this is something that this particular teacher is very good at. She's always questioning herself and questioning me and questioning the kids about what is the meaning of what we're doing. So those are the things I wanted to do besides actually playing in a garden with the kids, which was the major reason I wanted to do this research project. And to just give you an example of how she interrogates the curriculum with her students, I told you about the guinea pig. The guinea pig's name is Skippy. That's its pseudonym. That's not the real name of the guinea pig. But Skippy, she did this. I asked her how she integrates sustainability. We were just having a conversation. And she gave me this example. She said, here's Skippy. She takes a toy truck. She says, this truck is in China, picking up those little green peas that you can buy in the supermarket. I forget what they're called. Those little snap peas. If we want to feed Skippy snap peas, this truck has to go be in China, get filled with the snap peas, go on a boat, and she walks around the classroom, go on a boat, the boat needs gas, the truck needs gas, da-da-da-da-da-da, and she shows them the journey, the imaginary journey to bring the food to Skippy. And how sustainable is that when here we have, in our greenhouse, lettuce growing, and we can feed Skippy directly from the lettuce. So she's really amazing at making things real for the students. Yeah, and my history with the place, I wanted to say, the fact that I'd already been in the place, been there as a faculty advisor, I was trustworthy and I existed, that allowed me to be in the place in a deeper way and work with its teacher and her students of the previous academic year and this academic year. And because it's a 3-4 classroom, I get to work with some of the same students. I see them 2 years in a row. So last March, we started we planted a lot more plants because I had some research funds and I could buy a lot of organic seeds and more grow lights, and they planted a lot of plants, and that's what they planted. And everyone was doing fine, and the students also used the plants as part of the science curriculum, and they did a lot of fair tests. If we don't water a plant, and we do water a plant, what are the differences in plant growth? So stuff like that. And the teacher also had in her mind to send these plants home, some of the plants home as gifts, so that the children could have plants growing in pots, or if they had a space in the garden to plant the tomatoes, they would have a place to plant them. And then the rest of the plants were transplanted into those existing beds that I had mentioned. Well, a bad thing happened, a really bad thing for the children, for me, and for the teacher. Somebody walked into the garden and basically trampled all the tomato plants that they had been growing from March till June. And there was like 1 or 2 left. And I wasn't there at the time. I was out of the city. But I heard this story when I came back. And the students had a long conversation about it, and they decided to use the seeds and plant seeds in the garden. And they also got a few mature seedlings. And there was an arrangement that over the summer, there would be a summer program. And that program manager, who happened to be one of the students in my program, would actually make sure the plants got watered over the summer, because the teacher wasn't going to be able to do that. But when they came back, the program manager had changed, and so the beds were full of weeds, and some of the plants had gone to seed, and some of the plants never got as big as they were supposed to get. And the teacher was disappointed, and so were the children. However, we did manage to harvest things. And that's sort of like, I came in there and I said, oh, okay, it's a big mess, but let's, and I went with the kids and we pulled out the weeds and, you know, harvested what we could harvest. And that's all lettuce. And there was enough lettuce to feed all the kids in the room a salad. Lettuce and cucumbers, no tomatoes, but lettuce and cucumbers and some herbs that they had planted. So, and then a couple weeks later, we harvested some of the little zucchinis had grown a little bit bigger, and they made a stone soup with bringing in other things from outside the school. And they did the story, and they made soup for everybody and more. So what's going to happen to the garden? Well, this February, we're going to start planting again. And as well as planting seeds, I'm hoping to do some community work that will support the garden in the spring and make it possible that maybe they won't get trampled this year. Or maybe we'll build a high fence. But I think I'd rather, one of the plans is to maybe work with the high school, which has also already worked with the school before, with high school students, and maybe if they're on board and supportive, maybe things won't get trampled. So my initial intention in working in a school garden was not just to work with one teacher in one classroom. It was to build community gardens like exist in Frontier School Division, for example, like where lots of people are involved. So that's hopefully down the road that's going to happen. But you had to start in the place, and the place turned out to be this particular grade 3-4 classroom with a teacher who was very excited about doing this kind of work and was already doing it. So to continue to build community, you have to work with the administration, with other teachers, with the high school students. And I have this idea that there's a lot of senior citizens in the area who might know about gardening and whose expertise could be part of the process. So we need this community building to sustain the garden, so things don't get trampled. So if this teacher leaves the school to teach in another school in Winnipeg School Division, then we can still have a garden. We need it because the climate is awful here, and schools are shut when the garden is growing. I mean, the winter climate is awful, and the general climate is awful for school gardening. We also need it because building community is intrinsically valuable for any school. And many of the presentations we've heard today and other days can remind us of that. In the strategies for that community building, I wish Jim Silver was still here and Shauna McKinnon, because they could speak to this better than I. But as far as I know, when you're in a school or in a community, you start with what's there. You don't say, how come the students in this school don't know about soccer? You say, do they want to know about soccer? And if they want to know about soccer, then how can I make soccer accessible to those students? So you start with what's there, and then you look at what resources will support whatever the students and the families want to do, right? Who's in the community knows something about soccer, or who in the community knows something about tomato plants? And you also look at what's in the way. What's in the way? There's a lot of things in the way in the school ground at Champlain. There's like the high school students are in the way, and the poverty in the community is in the way. And there's lots of things in the way, but there's lots of things that are good there. You need to know what both those sets of things are, and you have that dialogue with the community. You invite people into the dialogue, and some people won't take it up. But you still make the invitation, and then you see what happens, and you respect that this community is what it is. Because if you don't do that, it's coming in as an outsider, then it's hopeless, I think. You have to be where the so place-based learning isn't just about for the kids, it's also for the adults. And I don't know how I'm doing for time, but I will tell you one more quick story, and then if there's any time for questions. I was on study leave from the university from July till December, and I spent 2 weeks taking a course called Gandhi and Globalization on a farm in northern India, an organic farm. Oops! I spent 2 weeks on this farm in northern India taking a course. It's an organic farm, and part of the course is that you had to work on the farm. And part of who was there was all these people from all over the world of all ages. And for me, it was a really example of what place-based learning is about. It's like everything, all the learning was connected to what we were doing in this particular place. I couldn't do that. I couldn't teach that course at the University of Winnipeg because it was so related to the physical location. And it was entirely inspiring because the ethos was that you can make change, right? You can make change in education by doing things and learning how to do them. And that is my wish, that can happen for kids in schools, in gardens. And this is just words from a very wise teacher I had once upon a time. And thank you very much.
Any questions? Is it okay if I comment? I didn't know
Oh,
when,
yes.
when Leanne was going to do this presentation, I didn't know she was going to be talking about my former school, which I just left in June. And just to give you a little bit of an idea, it's an elementary school in the North End, and it has lots of challenges in terms of population. 55% of the families live below the poverty line, 48% are single-parent families. There's lots of poverty there, but the work that Leanne has done and that continues to happen builds community. And we have lots of people getting involved. I got a plant. I've had 2 basil plants in the last 2 years. And I know when the teacher first started and put up her greenhouse, I came to work a couple mornings later, and I had parents in the community who had phoned to complain because the lights from the greenhouse had kept them up across the street,
Yes.
right? And then the other piece too, in the summertime, the work of having a hose be able to come out to the back of the school to water the gardens. So there's all those little pieces, that the challenges that are there that you work against. And we're fortunate that we do have a summer, or they do have a summer program there where there can be staff and students there that have bought into taking care of the gardens. So
Over
it's
the
really,
summer. Yeah.
really a great opportunity for the community. So thank you for that.
Welcome.
Thanks.
One more question?
I just wondered if are we allowed to have a question? Or
Oh, certainly.
Okay. I'll let Ray talk about what's happening in Frontier, but at University College of the North, we're teaching pre-service teachers to work with our grade 5 and 6 students in school district of Mystery Lake. We don't have a gardening project, but we do have place-based learning where they're going out onto the land, because a lot of these students, they're Indigenous or First Nation students. They're a generation or 2 at least removed from land-based learning, so they're not trappers, they're not fishers, they're not involved in that. So we work with the elders, and it's an intergenerational, and I know you talked about that, but it's really, really important, because you had just a single classroom. It's really important to see that relationship when you're working with how place-based learning can bring a community together, because you've got the kids who are 10, 11 years old. You have our pre-service teachers who are many of them are in their 20s. My faculty who are not in their 20s, and then the elders. And they go out to a place called Mile 20, which is a culture camp about an hour outside of Thompson, and they spend a week there. And they go back to learning the social studies and science curriculum based on what they can draw from the land. So it's really important. Can't remember the presentation. I think it was Rob's comment about the soul, and the Latin root of that means to actually draw out. And I told that to one of the elders, and there's a term in Cree that means essentially the same thing, but that's kind of an aside. But that intergenerational opportunity for learning is really, really crucial, and I just wanted to
Affirm that.
acknowledge that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I know that you've touched on the involvement of community, but I'm curious because I know that a lot of parent councils and a lot of parent groups get very actively involved in gardening projects in schools, and if you what you found the engagement level is like from families, especially because there's a component of the healthy eating and other things that are obviously being touched on there, and if you had high involvement or engagement by families in being involved in the project.
At this particular school or in general?
I was just
At
wondering if
this
you could
school,
expand.
I haven't started working with the families yet. I just started working with the teacher, and that's the next step, would be to work with the parent council and the administration and see if we can get more people involved. Absolutely. What I've read in the literature is that, it's really important. It's really important. And usually, it depends on the community whether parents have the time, the inclination, but the more they can get involved, exactly as you say, the better. And grandparents are valuable, and aunties and uncles. It doesn't, so it's a good thing to try and incorporate.
Just one funny story about that new potato patch we developed out of a parking lot. I told a few people that we harvested about 2/3 of it, and we're saving 1/3 of the patch for a feast that we were having, our fall feast, which we have every year with all the Wayfinders and Maples families. And on the weekend before the feast, somebody came and harvested that 1/3 of our potatoes from the community. So we didn't get too excited. We've thought of expanding into the hydro corridor. I think I mentioned that there's a huge hydro corridor. The dilemma with, we have extensive gardening, three gardens connected to our program. We have kids through the summer, staff through the summer. That's one reason we can sustain it. We're thinking of developing internships, employment, kind of green team, maybe some funding from green team, various things. And I can foresee kids helping to sustain gardens. Now, what we haven't done, ours is really internal to staff culture and a kid exposure of kids. We haven't, other than people stealing the potatoes, involved the community. It could become, though, a garden to community. We did give a little old lady came by and traded a bag of potatoes for a bag of apples from her tree. That was ideal.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the kind of thing that we can just build on.
A lot of schools in the States, the kids harvest their gardens and they give part of it to food, food banks, or they give part of it to food markets, or to deliver it to families in need, so that you can connect out that way too.
Just to add to that, Leanne, a couple years prior to that, and I'm sorry I can't remember people's names, but a gentleman named Michael approached Champlain School about, he had purchased a building in the community, and he wanted to know if the grade 5-6 students would be interested in doing the gardens and plantings around the building. So one of the grade 5-6 teachers said, great, I'd love to do that. So a horticulturalist horticulturalist came in and trained the students on all the different kinds of indigenous plants, all the soils and everything else. They did some planting around our school or the school. And then they went across Main Street, did all the plantings, had spent a whole day there, a phenomenal day. I think Skinner's came and gave them hot dogs. And they created a book as well. And it was just a phenomenal experience. And then Michael donated $2,000 to the school. So the grade 6 students had the option to decide what to do with the money. Well, they paid it forward. They gave $500 to 4 children's charities. Children's Wish Foundation, Dreams Take Flight, and I'm sorry I can't remember the other 2 at the moment. But you look at the work that can take place that can inspire kids through, again, the work that you do. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks.